Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Jared at 3Cs, excited as always to be talking about Beta dirt bikes. And in particular, this is a 2022 Beta 300 Race Edition. We picked this bike up used. We're gonna put it into the race department. So we're gonna use this bike for all the racers here at the shop. And if you're like on the market looking for a new bike, but you can't quite afford that new bike, there's always really good deals to be found online. My phone's always filtering them on Marketplace. It's always showing me like Beta stuff, because that's what I do. And I saw this bike pop up in Cincinnati. We're in New York, it's like 6-hour drive. Thankfully, one of my best friends lives in Cincinnati. So I messaged this guy right away. As soon as I saw this bike come up online, I messaged the guy, I'm like, dude, I'll take it, please hold it. He'll be there tonight with the cash. So I sent my friend straight from work right down to pick this bike up. Thankful for Ben for doing that for me. So the whole point of this video is if you're on Marketplace, you're looking for a used bike, I have bought and sold thousands of bikes. So I just want you guys to feel comfortable and kind of have an idea of what to look for. I have not touched it. I did try to start it in Ben's driveway, ran kind of funky. So I want to go through everything with you guys. I wasn't concerned about it because to build this bike the way it sits, we got full FMF, we got wheels, we got Recluse. This is a $13,000 build. I picked this bike up for $7 grand total, just the way it is, as clean as it is. So let's go over some of the stuff this bike has on it, and then we're going to talk about some of the things I noticed right away that I don't like. So let's jump into it. So I was on Marketplace, scrolled down, saw this listing. I'm always looking like in the background, like at the houses. The guy's garage was immaculate. Everything the guy had was nice. And whenever they're listing everything and there's just totes of extras, you know they took care of it. Everything is clean, like the spare rims are clean, the exhaust, everything about this bike was in really good shape. So I knew it was coming from a good home. And let's just kind of go over a short list of stuff this has. So this has the W wheels with Excel rims. These things are beautiful. I'm actually gonna save these rims off of this bike. We have a really cool project build coming up that we're gonna save these for. So it came with a second set of wheels because I got the stock wheels down here. We've got the full FMF exhaust. So up here we've got the gnarly pipe and the full TI silencer. The silencer alone is like 450 bucks, so it did really well on that. He's got the big IMS gas tank with the stock tank in the box. Kickstart kit, it's got the full auto Recluse in it. It's got the red anodized connector for the pipe here. It's got the race harness kit, which we're gonna talk about in a second. It's got all of the bling, so it's got the Beta red anodized caps. It's got the work connection perch mounts. It's got the slave cylinder guard on my side. It's got a full linkage skid plate on the bottom of it. It has the Turbis frame guards on it. We've got a full tall custom seat. It's the gut seat with the Phantom foam in it, so it's the nice stuff. Really well built. So just sitting here, there's like the exhaust is 800 bucks, the wheels are 2,500, the clutch is 1,000 bucks, skid plate. I mean, there's this bike is loaded. It's so cool. And then in the totes, he gave me all kinds of stuff. So inside of here, the top tote has a couple extras. It's got like the frame guards, which we'll stick on the wall in the showroom. Stock tank, stock wiring, because like I said, it has the race harness on it. And then the bottom tote, let me just slide this like this, has some pretty good stuff in it too. So let me swap this out. So it's got like the rim decals, all the clutch stuff, stock skid plate. There was like a cool bolt bin in here, I think. Came with some spare bolts. It came with a second set of hoses. So this bike is loaded, and you could kind of tell buying this bike from this gentleman how well he took care of everything. All of the notes, everything is together. So when you start seeing that and you're looking for a used bike, you should be a little more comfortable buying it because the guy took care of it. It wasn't just like he fogged this thing in his garage. Again, I haven't cleaned it. This is exactly how we picked it up. Bike was really well kept. So let's start going over some things that I don't like about it. So obviously I bought this bike sight unseen. I didn't really care. I figured all the extras that are on this thing, I'm totally cool with it. Don't even need to see it run. So he dropped it off my friend's Ben's house and we made the trip down there a couple weeks ago and picked this thing up. So come on in, Brax, I want to show you something. So right away when I got to Ben's house, so he put the race harness on there, which I think is great, but this is exactly how I found it. And I'm going to show you guys in a minute how I would rather route this. He did a, long term, I'm going to take this tank off. We're going to dielectric grease everything on this bike. But this is super dangerous because these wires can come out here and we could potentially pinch all of this right in the middle. So we need to secure these wires more up underneath the number plate. I'd like to see them like this, coming up in and behind here. And then the first thing I noticed right away was check out this throttle cable come in. So this is super dangerous. Don't ever do this to your throttle cable. It's on the wrong side of the handlebar here. So we need to reroute this throttle cable. Every Beta 2-stroke since 2013, the throttle cable comes out on the back side of the handlebars. And I actually have a couple throttle cables in stock. So if this does not, it's probably been like this for a year or so. So I'm not sure how bent that cable is, like wanting to stay like that. I might have to put a new throttle cable on it. I do not like that, not safe. He's got the bars rolled really far forward. That's totally personal preference. You also cut these bars down, and they're the fat bar, tall bars. So I'm probably gonna put stock bars back on it. All the guys that ride for me here at the shop, we just love the standard Beta bar bend. So these are really narrow, really tall, really rocked forward. Again, that is personal preference. Not worried about that at all, but I don't like it. We're gonna put stock bars back on it. I have a couple of sets of used ones here. If you come in here, maybe come around the other side of the bike here, Bex. This is just something that I'm picky about. If you look how this clutch cable is routed right here, it's really hitting that number plate, and after a while that'll hurt your braided line. And I think a lot of this is just due to the way he has his bars rotated. So normally there's a lot of clearance between a number plate and the clutch cylinder, so I think that'll be resolved when I pull the bars back. And if you look here, the stock brake line, if you back up just a little bit, Brax, you can see how kinked this brake line is. So I already ordered a new brake line. I actually ordered the brake line off of the 2024 bikes because the 2024 bikes have a new crimp. So if you look at this thing, Beta always traditionally just had this plastic housing on the top that was supposed to hold this sleeve still. Well, the new ones are actually crimped with a metal crimp. So I've got a brand new brake line coming for it because I think this is a little dangerous. I don't want to be halfway through a race, and as the suspension collapses, you can see how it's like pre-bent. It's already wanting to go inside of there. So I'm not in love with that. For as little as time that's on this bike, there's some really things that I don't even want to go to a race or ride it. I want to fix a couple of these things right away. Underneath the seat, I noticed, you can see, and I always like, when I sell a new bike, I always tell customers, if you can fit your fingers in here, the seat isn't on right. So I could tell right away whenever I pick the bike up, the seat's always been on wrong. And here, let me show, so if you can see me unclick it. So it unclicks fine, but if you look on the bottom, this thing's been pinched off the wrong way forever. You can see the wear marks on the top here, and also the wear marks are showing here. So what I really like to do with these seats, I'm not sure if this base is gonna come back, but I'm gonna take a pair of pliers and try to pull these ends out. What happens is sometimes folks start too high with the seat and then they just click straight down. In reality, you gotta pull back a little bit, try to fit it. Oh, it might have already. This one's gonna take some time to like get it to go back to where it needs to go because it's been bent for so long, but it's starting to actually, my first try there. This seat base is pretty warped. So you can see though that it's starting to catch like it's supposed to go up underneath, and that's gonna sit right. So you really don't want much of a gap there because you don't want mud and air water to come inside of here. So these are a couple of the things that I noticed, and let's jump into a checklist of things that I want you guys to go over. So now that we kind of did a visual on the bike, we noticed a couple things that we don't like right away that I don't think are safe, which is okay. Like the bike's been fine, I'm sure you rode it. I would not ride it like this. But let's go over some things that I'm pretty quick to make decisions, and if you're in the driveway checking the bike out, there's some extra things that I would probably do before I bought the bike if it was like my only bike and I'm not used to buying bikes all the time. So the bike is up on the stand now, so it's easy to check this, but you want to always check like free play. So I'm holding down on the fender and I'm pulling up on the rear wheel, and you're looking for slop, and I wish that KX was still. So the reason why that KX has a strap on it is the linkage is off of it right now, because that bike came in used, and when I did the same test on that bike, you could move this rear wheel like half an inch. Like the linkage was completely shot on that KX, so that's not safe either. It's not what you want to feel. And then I'm going to try to just shake the wheel side to side, and you can tell the way this bike is and all the stuff this owner did, the bearings are fine on this thing. There's zero issues there. But what I'm feeling for is, how do my wheel bearings feel? How do the swing arm bearings feel? And how do the linkage bearings feel? So If I would have noticed some slop here at all, anything, I would have started to try to fine tune it, maybe have a friend do it so I can get my eyes down here better and see which bearing in particular is the one that has slop in it. So we would have checked, you know, bearings and stuff like that. Obviously chain and sprockets are wear items. This stuff is brand new. Like the chain's in great shape, the sprockets are in great shape, the front sprocket's doing great still. So I think we can get a pretty good amount of time out of it. I'm also looking at the counter shaft sprocket. You can see it's a little wet because there's a seal behind here, the counter shaft sprocket seal. We've done videos on our channel before. You know, you're kind of looking for leakage here. Again, that's a wear item. That's not something that I want you guys to be like, oh, I'm not buying the bike because of that, because it's like a $35 kit. You pull the clip off, put the new seal on there. Not a big deal, but something to look for. And again, this bike is spotless, so there's nothing really wrong there. And I have not yet pulled the side panel off, so let's check out this air filter. So you're in the gentleman's garage, checking the bike out. That air filter's fine. Like, to me, that's not a big deal. I think I would still ride it like that. Obviously, with us just getting the bike, we're gonna put a brand new one in it. And again, oh, check this out. So this is not good. So his ECU, so the whole routing of this wire harness is not how it should go. I've just done so many bikes that I know that, but
sitting in the air box?
Well, this normally sits in the air box, but it's usually, let's get this seat out of the way. So this ECU is just fogging against the air filter, which can cause the air filter to fall off. You can put a hole in your air filter. It's not good. Normally these ECUs are up underneath the battery tray, like this. Come down a little bit, Brax, so you can. So normally it clips up under there. It's got this bracket on it, right? So normally that sits up here. And one of the reasons why that fell off is this battery is not in here, right? So if I pull this battery cover off, this battery, yeah, it's got all kinds of, so these need to come off the back side. So you take these off, because the battery, the way he had it sitting, come in this view right here, Brax. The way he had it rocked in here like this, it's pushing on the bracket. The battery needs to sit flat on the bottom like this. That's how the battery needs to sit on these bikes. And it probably wouldn't have pushed the ECU off the bottom of the bracket. I'm trying to get the ECU back up here to show you guys. So the ECU sits like this, right? And when the battery is kinked like this, it's jamming the ECU down. So another safety thing you guys can do is on these ECUs, you can put a zip tie around that to the bracket to prevent that from happening. So that is not the first time I've seen that, but it's not encouraging. It's not what you want to see. You know, that's not good for that to be flopping around there. That's the brain of your bike. So we were kind of talking about air filter and we got sidetracked there. So, you know, if the customer had just put a brand new air filter in here for you, he's like, yeah, I change it all the time. Well, that's awesome that he would do it, but let's always check behind the air filter. We always want to look. They could be hiding a problem, right? Like maybe he just put a new air filter in it for the first time ever. So let's look down in the car boot there. Can you see it all down in there, buddy? It's pretty tough. Yeah. So the camera's going to have a hard time showing what I'm doing here. So try to find a clean finger, and we're just going to wipe down in here just to kind of feel for it here. So some of this is already on my finger. This is super clean. There's a little bit here, and you always got to wonder, did some of this fall down in from the top? So if there was dirt right here that looks pretty fresh and clean like ours was, I don't think that was inside of there. I can actually see the carburetor, and I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, you can't see
no, you can't, but I'm just kind of explaining at home. I can see the carb, everything looks clean. Let's check out the back side of this air filter. The air filter looks fine. So, and you can tell that it had a pretty good seal on it all the way around because the pinch ring there. So a little bit of dirt on the back side, but it's not on the inside. This is on the outside of the air filter. So I'm really happy with the car boot. I don't think the motor's been sucking any dirt. You can tell, hey, check that out. Look where the ECU has been rubbing on the air filter. So it's been like that for a while. And if you would, so this bike's getting a brand new air filter. Look at that. It's wearing through right there, bud.
Dang.
See that right there, that wear? It's hard to tell in the film, but it's starting to rub there, and that's not what you want to see. So this bike is going to get a brand new air filter. The rest of the air box, if you look in there, bud, it's got some dirt in it, which is pretty standard, but at least there's no big clumps. So really happy with that. Let's move on to the next thing. So I'm gonna slide this back together because I wanna start this bike for you guys outside here in a minute and kind of show you some stuff. So for me to start this bike for 10 minutes, that air filter is fine. The ECU is not gonna matter because I'm not actually gonna be jumping this thing or hurting it. We're gonna fix that for sure. I'm just gonna set the seat back on it as well. So let's talk about like the fuel. So how long has this bike been sitting? If the customer hadn't ridden this bike in like 3 months, I would definitely recommend draining the fuel out of it, put fresh gas in this bike, maybe clean the carb, which I might have to do. We need to go outside and run this thing. When I ran it in Cincinnati for about 5 minutes, I wasn't super happy with it. Little things, like if throttle's wrong and the carb's wrong, like the guy might have had a really bad experience with the Beta when he shouldn't have. It's got the Recluse clutch in it. We're gonna get to that in a minute when we started outside. I wasn't happy with that either. But let's move toward the front of the bike. So we've inspected the back, we've inspected the air filter. You know, it's always nice to do a compression test if you're nervous about it. I don't think this bike has a ton of hours on it, so he did have different graphics. If you zoom over, no, not to zoom, but just pan over this way. You can tell like this had a different graphic on it. On the other side of the swing arm, there were graphics. So I think that these plastics were removed and saved, but the rest of this bike does not show much wear at all. You know, the guys here at the shop, like we would damage this way more, even though the plastics, I'm looking at the tank, looking at the frame guards, I'm looking at the foot pegs. None of this stuff has a ton of wear on it. I think maybe 40 hours, I'm gonna guess. I don't see an hour meter anywhere on it. So let's move forward, and you can tell the fork seals are in perfect shape. The fork tubes look great. So we're looking at the fork tubes just to look for any kind of damage. You know, if it's nicked here anywhere and you're continually putting the fork seal past it, it could cause the fork seal to rip. I don't see any problems with that. And oh, what's this down here, bud? What's you got going on here? So I have no idea. So what's going on here is this bolt does not look good. I don't love that at all. So this is your Speedo cable bolt, and it's backed out. It's tight. I bet that's like cross-threaded in there. So the Speedo cable, so for us to run an hour meter, you can zoom out a little bit. Yeah. For us to run the Speedo to know how fast we're going, the Speedo cable usually comes out, goes next to the brake line, goes up in its separate hole right here and all the way up through and plugs in behind the bike. This is supposed to be, you take the caliper completely off the bike and you unthread that. This was all part of that, and I don't know how it's still in there by itself. So I'm not happy with that. That definitely, we're gonna take this caliper completely off. We're just gonna get that bolt out of there. We'll never put a Speedo back on this bike. Hopefully I can save the threads though. So if we go to sell the bike, that'll be okay. So not good. The front wheel bearings feel great. There's nothing wrong with those. The front brake pads look great. There's no mud in here at all. So this bike's never sat in mud. You know, the bottom of the brake pads, typically there's some mud buildup. Nothing. This bike is super clean. The pipe is in really good shape all the way around. You can tell it hasn't been racked in the rocks. And another way I can tell it's never been leaned over or crashed hard is you start to look at the radiator. So you can do this. You know, I don't know if the customer and you're looking at the bike is going to let you do this, but it's really simple to pop this out. You can see how straight the outside edge of this radiator is, which means it's never had side pressure on it. The fins, you're gonna get this. Like this is a pretty normal little dent. This could even be from the factory or from the dealer setting the bike up. So these little dings in the fins are totally fine. Let's check the coolant on it, because this customer did add the Samco hose kit. So it's got aftermarket hoses on it. Let's see how we did with our coolant. So it's got plenty of coolant in it.
Again, you probably won't be able to see.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to see it, but there's coolant right there, like I wanna see it. Perfect level on the coolant. The radiator on the other side does look the same as this, so radiators are in really good shape. So that's kind of like my pre-bike inspection, right? So we checked all the main stuff, we checked wear items. This whole brake line is coming off. So I noticed that he must have had white plastics on here too at one point, because if this was stock, this would have had a red clip holding the pieces together. So he had some white plastics, which kind of confirms my theory on a different set of graphics and plastics. So let me put this back on here. So let's go outside right now and let's try to start this thing. It's really cold outside here in New York. It's like actually 28 degrees this morning. So this fuel, I don't know how old it is. You know, it's February. I'm sure the guy hasn't really ridden since October. So this fuel could probably be 3 or 4 months old. So let's go outside. Let's try to start it. One last thing that we'll talk about before we do that is the oil. So there is a check bolt on these bikes. You can pull the check bolt, make sure there's oil in it, which we can do here in a minute. But we are absolutely just going to drain this oil and flush it. You know, the oil is like $15 a quart. I don't really care how much it costs. You never know with a previous owner. It's always a good idea to start fresh with oil. That way you can keep accurate records of it. And one thing that we are going to add to this bike is going to be an hour meter. We're absolutely going to add an hour meter to it so I can keep track of hours moving forward. Again, I don't see one glaring at me anywhere, so I do not think it's in it. So let's pull this bike outside. I'm going to try to start it for you guys and show you what I think is going on. All right, guys, welcome outside. It is 28 degrees, so we're not going to spend a ton of time out here. This bike is perfectly cold. We have not started it yet, just pushed it out. One thing I noticed right away is that there is zero throttle free play, or very little. I get so nervous the way this is routed. So what about if you're turning this way and you pull on it harder, or this way and pull on it harder? All that throttle free play can get soaked up super quick. So let's try to start it. I did try to adjust the idle when we were in Cincinnati. I'm gonna turn the gas on here, give it a quick start. So I might have fixed the idle when we were down there already. So this thing did not idle at all when we picked it up. The choke is already off. It is pretty warm inside the shop. So the engine's warmed up a little bit. It's not like a dead cold motor out of a shack. So choke is already off. So I'm actually super happy with the way it's idling. It was not like this when we picked it up. And I'm gonna adjust this Recluse back to where it was when we picked it up. So when we pick the bike up, the idea of the Recluse clutch is that you don't have to use the clutch. It's in neutral right now. And let me try to see what happens here. So I'm holding the clutch in. Come on in a little bit, Braxton. So the bike is idling. Clutch is in, and it's going. So that's not safe. That's not what's supposed to happen. So when the clutch is in, it is supposed to override the Recluse. So meaning, you should either pull this in, rev the bike, and it should not go forward. And also, come on in a little bit. You can see how the bike, if I let out on it, it's just gonna stall. So, see how it's taking off even with the clutch in? I'm holding the brake to hold the bike still. This is not adjusted right at all. So, I can't even find neutral with it. There's too much pressure on the gearbox. So, the Recluse, we need to adjust it in, and I was trying to do it while I was in Cincinnati, so I'm going to go in like one full turn. There's little tick marks on the side. Come on over on this side, Braxton. Let's show what we're doing here. So this Recluse has an adjustable lever that pushes against the slave cylinder. Well, the throwout bearing on the clutch. So this slave cylinder is adjustable. We're pushing the rod that pushes against the slave cylinder, or the push rod. So we're trying to have less pressure on the clutch right away. We're trying to push this out further. So I screwed it in. So let's see, we're in neutral. You can stay on this side of the bike. Again, this is neutral. And real quick, this thing starts really easy, so compression's perfect on it. If the bike would not have started in the driveway with a customer, you're like, oh boy, you know what's going on with it. So thing starts great. So I went in one full turn. We're getting better. We're getting a lot better. So clutch is in and I can rev it now. Still moves a little. And let's let out in first gear. Okay, it's actually sitting still. And then it should be able to take off a little bit. I still want to go a little bit more with it. So the problem with this is if you go too far, let's go just a little bit with it here. I'm going to go a quarter turn. So here's the problem. If I screwed this in too far, then my throwout bearing never has enough pressure on the clutch plates to actually grab and take off. So if you have too little pressure and then you need a lot of power and you give it a lot of throttle, the motor can't, the torque will overcome the clutches, slip. So it's not what you want either. So I was in gear. Should have let it start though. So that's neutral. I'm in first with the clutch in. I'm gonna let out on the clutch. Just sitting here. Okay, this is way more adjusted like it needs to be now. The only thing is that I go too far. Like I don't want clutch slippage either. That's really bad. So maybe I'll go back out just a little bit. And then as this bike gets ridden, so the Recluse is actually not staying in this bike. We're gonna take it out. We're gonna put it on the shelf and we're gonna sell it. So none of the guys here at the shop, we don't need Recluses. It'll be a great selling feature that we can have on the shelf. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. The whole point was if you're looking for a used bike, these are some things that I would look for. You know, every bike is different. That's the problem with buying used is you don't know the full history of it. But if you can try to piece together a deal like this, where you know just by looking at it how clean it is, you know it came from a good home. There's always going to be little quirks that people do to things. So even though I'm going to spend like $400 or $500 to make this bike the way I want it, we bought this for $7 grand. So $7,000 purchase, $13,000 package. In my mind, that's what's on this thing. So don't be afraid of the used market. And if you have questions, give us a call. I'm Jared from 3C's Recreation. Please consider subscribing to our channel and we'll see you on the trail.